EdTech update. So we're just going to talk all things general education technology. So let's bring on Troy and George. Hi, guys.
Good afternoon.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. George, let's start with you. Can you do a little introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Sure. My name is George Shako. I'm the Senior Director for Classroom and Academic Technologies here at Pace University. We are an amazing multi-campus university with campuses on New York City as well as in Westchester, and we have a law school in Westchester as well. That's my 9-to-5 hat. I am also the immediate past president of ETC and the co-founder and president of Next Level, a nonprofit organization catered towards diversifying and youthifying AV.
I love that. Troy, what about you?
Troy Powers. I lead the support team at Northwestern University, the central IT support team. I'm also the 2-year executive director at large for the Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance. Been in AV for, about 11, 12 years now. And I was an electrician before this. So very familiar with, kind of the installation and that side of things, as well as the support side, which I'm doing now.
Thank you both for joining me. And I want to give a quick shout out to Lex because she actually recommended both of you for this panel. So we have, we love HETMA. They're always helping us find speakers and quality speakers. I'm excited about today. Let's jump right in. How have recent ProAV advancements in EdTech transformed the learning experience for students in both higher ed and K-12?
Well, I think speaking for higher ed specifically, I think lecture capture has been a great advantage for us. I think it creates a lot of equity. Northwestern has a large population of international students. About maybe a third of our students are international. So that language barrier, can be difficult to follow in class. So having that, recording to fall back on has been very beneficial. And I think just for everybody, right? It can be hard to follow. It's easy to get distracted. Whatever it is that happens. Maybe you understand most things, but you had trouble with this one part. Being able to kind of go back and follow up has been really advantageous. So,
I'd like to say I want to talk about it from a larger perspective. Post-pandemic, I think we're seeing quite a bit of boom. A lot of this stuff has been here for a long time, but we are now looking at some of these already existing tech booming, right? So AR, VR stuff. So we have a lot of interactive technology here at Pace and other universities around us. But some of the ones that I really like is our School of Nursing, our College of Health Professions has and I'm going to butcher the name, but an anatomage table. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But basically, it's a 55-inch interactive TV that the students can go stand around, and they have a cadaver or whatever it is that was donated by the medical school, and they could zoom in and say, oh, this capillary burst or this bone is broken here, and so on and so forth. Wonderful, right? Amazing to see that. Our School of Education has the immersion software, which is you go in front of a TV and you are teaching to a virtual classroom. The students are reacting. I've seen, students dozing off, throwing spitballs at each other during a session. It's really cool to see. So we have all these tools and these experiences that have been in existence, but are really booming. Another thing I'm seeing is collaboration tools, right? People using something as simple as OneDrive or Google Drive or just using, Teams chat or Zoom chat or Slack chat. I think Slack's still around. I'm not sure. But, all these things are really, really good to see.
That's exciting. I'd love to hear more about that sometime. So one of the things that has been growing since the pandemic is hybrid learning models. In your opinion, what are the most important considerations so that you ensure equitable access to technology and resources for all students?
I can start on this one, Troy, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Me personally, and what I'm seeing around this whole hybrid model learning is fading, right? I think there is quite a push to come back to the classroom. Now, there is a version of flavor of hybrid learning, which is, hey, I'm sick, I'm not feeling well. Believe it or not, COVID is still around, right? So, hey, can I dial into class today? Or I have a guest speaker, or so on and so forth. Or we have a completely online class that meets once a month on Zoom and catches up. So there are wonderful benefits of the high flex learning. And if we're talking about um, you know how to make it equitable, I think it's important to think about accessibility. I think that's the most important part of this, whether it's just as simple as closed captioning, or Zoom has the AI companion tool, which is a wonderful tool. I live by it. But I think training for the faculty or the students, whoever is running it, is critical. That's something you'll hear me say quite a bit today and everywhere. Is training, and some more training, even when nobody shows up. Offer it anyway.
I would mirror what George is saying about training, but also simplicity. Like that's what kind of our focus is, to limit the number of interactions the faculty have to make with the system to make it work and do what they want it to do. You know, limit how the number of cables they need to plug into their machine. The number of clicks they need to make to get cameras working, etc. Northwestern is kind of officially an in-person only. Like we've never really embraced that hybrid kind of learning aspect outside of when we weren't allowed in the classrooms. That being said, I think like George was saying, accessibility. So I mean, things like microphones can pick up the audience. Whether that's something like a catchbox system that you're throwing around, kind of improving engagement there, or any of the many different versions of ceiling microphones out there that you could use. So capturing the audio of the classroom to make sure you catch all of that engagement is really probably the most important thing. It would be nice to be able to see those people as well, right? Having multiple camera views. So I think those are kind of two components of hybrid that are really important, that maybe weren't a little bit overlooked. I think when we were first gearing up, and equipping extra rooms for hybrid, because of the pandemic, the default was to put that camera in the back of the room to see the faculty member, which, I mean, that's great for like lecture capture and things like that, but that's not an engaged classroom, right? Maybe it would have been better to have it the other way, or maybe catch a side view or something so you could see both. But yeah, I think those are the two kind of key components: is audio, being able to pick up the audience engagement, audio and video.
So you made an interesting point about being in person only until you had to not be. How are things now? Like, how did you upgrade things, and do you still use the technology, or is it just kind of sitting there?
So I mean, like I said in the first question, lecture capture is really where our focus was, and then really in terms of when we're designing, upgrades to the classrooms, like that's where our focus has been. So we have a lot of essentially all but maybe 15 classrooms now are equipped with that camera in the back of the classroom to try to catch the faculty at the front of the classroom. A large portion have ceiling microphones, and that's kind of the model we're moving towards. It avoids having to deal with batteries, and it's just easier for the faculty. They don't have to put anything on. And they're picking up audio so well now. It's not as good as a lavalier. It's not as good as talking to a handheld, but it's good enough that I'm okay with it, and so is everybody else. Especially with the added advantages of audience engagement and not having to deal with batteries, not having to deal with mic placement, which is always a nightmare with faculty. So I think that's really like I said, that's been our focus, is lecture capture, and Zoom, like George was saying, bringing people in when they're sick, bringing in a guest speaker. That's really how it's been mostly utilized in terms of hybrid outside. Not in the classroom because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and I can add to that a little bit. Slightly different dimension. I said we're a multi-campus institution, so we've had a flavor of the web learning, really, but not really. We used to have the Cisco MX. I don't know if I'm allowed to use model numbers.
Yeah.
But we had some Cisco devices that we would have, and we would have our New York City campus, and we would have our Pleasantville campus, and then the teacher would teach between the campuses. Once we moved into this high-flex hybrid style of learning, we started converting all our classrooms into, let's put a camera in the back of the room, let's put a ceiling tile microphone, let's capture this. So essentially, we moved away from the VC room model, and essentially every single one of our classrooms is Zoom enabled. We also use Zoom to capture our lectures. I just found a different way to say lecture capture than Troy. But basically, we use Panopto as our video repository, and we have our Zoom room set up in every single classroom. Professor goes in, hits record. All the content is recorded through Zoom, automatically uploaded to Panopto, and then it is put into their Brightspace LMS shell. All done automatically. Well, automatically to the professor, right? The legwork is done by us, but nobody needs to know. And that's how we're using the tech right now. So while we have that high flex flavor, which is readily available in this, and it's important to think, and I think Troy, you touched on this a little bit, it's important that we use these ceiling tile microphones to capture the student interaction, even in a lecture capture, not just in a hybrid high flex situation, right? So if a student's asking a question, that is recorded and stored on the Panopto servers. And now what we've essentially done is we've, it's the old term, flipped the classroom. So basically the classroom has become, and we have a couple of faculty members that are doing this, where you come to the classroom and you're not taking notes. It's just a straight lecture. And the students then go back and they can view the recording and they can take their notes. They can make bookmarks. They can post their questions on the lecture capture software, and this faculty member can interact with them in that sense. And it's really just making effective use of class time and office time and all that kind of stuff.
So you talked a little bit about upgrades, and I want to kind of dig into that a little bit more. What challenges do schools and universities face when you're doing a large-scale technology upgrade, and how can you effectively overcome these barriers? And I know probably the number one answer we're going to hear is budget, but I'll let you guys get into that.
I mean, like you said, budget, but also time, right? It takes a lot. I mean, it kind of comes down to changing technology on a campus on a large scale, right? I either have to change it all at once, right, which brings problems like now my staff training for the new tech. Where do I have the time to do that? But it maintains that consistent product, that consistent environment for the faculty, which is very important to me. Doing it piecemeal, right? That gives me the time to kind of maybe ease into it, right? But now I have to train my staff on the current tech and the new tech, like kind of at the same time. So that's an additional kind of concern. But I lose that consistency for the faculty, right? So there's a big problem there. There isn't really a great answer, because like when do you have, like, we'll never have the time to kind of or the money really to spend that, to do that wholesale change without some pretty serious changes to the way that we kind of have been refreshing classrooms for a long time, which is, this classroom gets changed over every 5 years, right? I don't know what a good answer is really. I mean, because without more money or more time, I mean, you can kind of overcome any of those problems with more of one of those two things, but they're finite resources. So you really kind of run into some problems. Which one do you have more of? And that's kind of the route you need to go.
Yeah, and I can add, two of my biggest hurdles. One or both of them are going to get me in trouble for saying it out loud, but old infrastructure, old buildings, old doors, windows, believe it or not, that all plays a part in this. Old whiteboards, slate whiteboards, all play a part in this, right? And the next one is resistance to change. I could bring in the latest and greatest tech in the classrooms, and there is either some fear to use it, some, I've been told that some of the tech that's in our classrooms are quote unquote threatening, that that is intense. But that resistance to change is a big factor. No matter how much we train, no matter how much, the one thing we've noticed is we do trainings 2 weeks before the semester starts. We're trying to figure out what's that sweet spot, right? Because everyone's gone throughout the summer, and when they come back, lo and behold, every year it's like we're starting new, right? So we said, you know what, the 2 week point is probably a good time. Most people are back, and then we realized we do the training 2 weeks, then semester starts, and the first 2 weeks of the semester, everyone's so engaged in getting the class off the ground and situated, and people dropping and adding classes, so on and so forth, that everything is forgotten, and we got to go through all that stuff again, and we're meeting with them again and again. So it's really, there is no sweet spot. So we do a lot of online training, and we've had a great turnout. We do it throughout the semester. We do, here's a set time, open office hours, show up, we'll help you individually, whatever it is. We use Zoom for all that. Breakout rooms are fantastic. We host 2 events before the start of the semester. We use Zoom events. Again, I keep using the name of companies. I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to.
Feel free.
In that case, we're a big Zoom shop. No, I'm kidding. And we have a lot of folks that do attend. So we've had record number of folks show up these past 2 years for these training sessions. And it's been wonderful. But again, old buildings, you still got to fight that battle.
So time, money, training, to sum that up. So I don't know if you watched the last section. We talked a little bit about this, about student privacy concerns. That's becoming a growing issue. As you're doing these technology updates, what role do data privacy and cybersecurity play in EdTech, and how are you protecting student information with your AV equipment?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a very serious concern, especially with, FERPA changes. And I think, it's really ambiguous right now because there hasn't really been a great challenge to FERPA to kind of suggest this is where, we really, there's no hard limit, right? So I think a lot of different schools are kind of making it up as they go along. Northwestern, I think being a private school has a little bit more wiggle room than like in my previous world of a public institution, but it's still it's tough, right? And especially when you get into things like the medical schools, it becomes an even murkier kind of subject. The way we've kind of gotten around it is you implied becoming a student at Northwestern, you've given us implied consent to record audio and video of you. So there's nothing more about it. Like, we can record, we maintain the recordings for a specified amount of time, depending on what the recording is. And they're not shared out publicly. They're held privately, only available to people in the classes and for other pretty specific reasons. But yeah, you can be recorded in any way as a student at Northwestern for pretty much whatever reason, as long as you're on campus.
Yeah, I mean, do your best to follow the FERPA, HIPAA, all those acronyms, whatever they stand for. Make sure you follow them tightly. Partner with companies that prioritize security and have strict policies, clear policies. But really, and internally, make sure your passwords for even your cameras are not admin. Come on, we know we all have at least one unit somewhere that's admin, right? Hopefully my ISO office is not on this call. But for me, I'm going to put my faculty hat on for a quick second. I also teach some courses here at PACE, and every October, because it is October, Cybersecurity Month, I do this little spiel on cybersecurity. And it's really funny to see how many kids, when I go through the list of top 10 passwords, and every semester, without fail, I have at least one student that tells me, I got to go back to my dorm and change my password. It's on the top 10 list. And, just all these little things, that information, getting that information out there, letting them know, as much as you'd love to, you are not the last known relative of the king of Ethiopia. Just don't click on that link. Just that kind of information, getting that out there and getting that awareness out there. If you doubt, if something looks suspicious, send it to your ISO office to get that information. Look at who the sender is, right? Get that kind of information. I think it's very important to get that information across.
I don't know if it was this month, it might have been last month, we got a little article about the top 10 most hacked passwords. So we're going to drop that in the chat. And the number one is password. So make sure to check that out. And one of the points you brought up is going to lead me into the next question. You said, you partner with these manufacturers and make sure that they're up to date on things. So what role do partnerships between educational institutions and technology providers, whether it's a manufacturer, an integrator, consultant, what do they play in driving innovation in the EdTech space? And how can you optimize these collaborations?
Sure. I mean, I'm very old school, and I believe in my partnerships. I need to talk to people. I can't just read up some informationals. Is that what it's called? Those little brochures that come on the internet and figure out what I need. I like to meet people. I get to hear what they think. I'm a part of Educational Technology Collaborative, which is a wonderful platform of other institutions. HETMA is another resource, and just hearing from people and connecting with people. But I don't want to pick one camera or one. I'm trying so hard not to use names. One camera or one DSP and put it in there. I like to know what everyone does. So the partnerships to me are very important for R&D, right? And I mentioned ETC using best practices from other schools. How did they implement something? How did they? What are the speed bumps challenges that they face? How do they overcome it? So those partnerships are extremely critical to our day-to-day and larger projects as well.
Yeah, I think, like George said, relationships are probably the key to it all, right? And being able to, call those people up on the phone and say, "Hey, I have this problem. Nothing you're making so far fixes it. What can we do?" And being able to have those conversations and kind of drive that innovation is very important. I think people in the EdTech space are kind of uniquely positioned to be a better support for manufacturers in that kind of innovative space, because we kind of own the technology from its inception to its completion, right? We're designing it. Oftentimes we're programming it, we're supporting it throughout its life, and there's not really another vertical that can say that. So we have a unique kind of outlook on the products and can kind of provide feedback that nobody else really can. So that's why partnerships, I think, with higher ed and our manufacturers are so advantageous to both, because like I said, I can make those phone calls. I can work with those manufacturers to develop the products that I need and make them fit the needs that I have. But they're getting valuable feedback about the product from, like I said, from inception to completion, essentially.
Yeah, it truly is a partnership. It's not just one way, which I like. I have one more question for you before we get to the audience question. What are some emerging trends that you're seeing in EdTech, and which ones do you see having the most significant long-term impact on curriculum development and personalized learning?
That's a loaded question. Do we have another hour for this session? AI, right? I think that's the most obvious answer. AI, and more AI, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's whatever it is, right? To me, we talked a lot about lecture capture, right? So we use, our faculty use the heat map that is provided in the lecture capture to see where the students are struggling. Oh, I need to spend more time on this portion of the lecture versus this one seems to be much easier for the students. So a lot of that information, and it's beyond AI cameras and directional microphones. I think it's everything that encompasses AI that'll be a part of the future. Gamification is a big deal. Putting that into syllabus, right? Anything as simple as Kahoot can change the setting in a classroom from I'm falling asleep to, oh, that's kind of cool. And AR, VR. I still believe that that's where the future of higher ed is that hands-on experiential learning, being able to see. I was at Apple HQ checking out their the VR glasses that Apple has, and God, that was beautiful. Went into a engine, and you're moving around, and it was amazing to watch. So, to me, those three things are the future.
Yeah, I mean, really kind of mirror what George is saying. I think AI and XR is kind of really where a lot of it is headed. You know, we're Northwestern's really old school. We have a lot of really old collections of artifacts that are, you know, one of a kind. I've got a team here that's doing a lot of great stuff with like photogrammetry. So like digitizing these objects, making them available online for students, you know, not just at Northwestern, but all over to be able to kind of access and put hands on. And that's something that really like you never would have been able to do otherwise, you know, like because access to these, you know, they're very old and rare, et cetera. So access is very restricted. So I think that's a kind of a really interesting way to kind of open things up. I think in addition to that, you know, like as George was saying with AI, there's just there's so much opportunity out there for you know, for continued learning in that space.
Let's dive into some audience questions. First, do you see a correlation between academic achievement and the cost of the technology deployed?
I don't know enough about the academic achievement, I'd say, side of things. But I think that's difficult to say. On being at Northwestern, you know, it's the students that come here are generally high performing students, so academic achievement is typically on the higher side. So I might not have the best answer to a question like that.
I think there is some correlation. I think there is some connection. I think there is something to be said for it. If I'm sitting in a classroom, and I mean, just imagine if you're in my classroom and I'm teaching a 3-hour lecture and you're staring on the back of his head for 3 hours, that's going to get boring very fast, right? So I think using tech, even if it's, hopefully it's not death by PowerPoint, but if you're using some sort of tech, whether it's Kahoot or whether it's just doing some kind of experiential learning, I think it's critical. But even, again, I'm going to go back to lecture capture because both Troy and I talked about it in great detail, right? When you take away the note taking from the class, when you're sitting there, you're taking notes, you're missing half the class, right? Because you can't, there's no way a student can take notes as fast as I speak or somebody else speaks, right? Especially if you're from New York. But if I'm sitting there listening to the conversation and the class period is 2 hours of open conversation, and then I can go back and I can watch the recording and I can take my notes on my own time, make little bookmarks and say, hey, I have a question about this. I have a question about this. This one didn't make sense. And again, you know, the data analytics, the professor can go in there and take a look. The 15 minutes into the presentation, the students were stuck and they kept going back and looking at it over and over and over again. Maybe I need to spend some more time on this. That kind of information is so critical. That all comes from technology. I think it does indeed play a part in that academic excellence.
So one of the parts of the question that I don't think we necessarily answered, because I think you could interpret it two ways, does the cost of the technology deployed correlate? So does that maybe, like, I think they're asking, like, if you're using really expensive technology versus like your low end example PowerPoint or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify that, but I think as long as you're using some flavor of it, I think, you know, like, for example, we can use Poll Everywhere, which is a paid tool, versus you can use Mentimeter, which is a free tool. So there's options either way you go. So there's no real way for me to quantify. Troy, I don't know.
I think kind of to answer that question and maybe avoid it a little bit, I'd say content is kind of the key there, right? Because bad content on expensive equipment doesn't, you know, it's still bad content, right? So I think, and I think that's kind of a problem too, is that us AV folks are not interacting, like we're not interacting with maybe that instructional design side as much as we should to kind of drive that problem, right? I keep hearing manufacturers push things like 8K, or I don't even want 4K in my classroom, because most of the faculty are still designing 4:3 slides, right? So that's a big problem, and I think content is kind of where some of that focus needs to be.
We have time for one more question really quickly. What is your budget cycle, and how do you determine what gets refreshed?
So we have we refresh our refresh cycles every 5 years for tech. Sometimes it feels like it should be much shorter than that, but it's not realistic. Our refresh cycle is every 5 years, and we do it in the summer typically.
So likewise in the summer, we've actually, since COVID and the supply chain problems, we've actually kind of gone a different way, and we're starting to replace gear wholesale as opposed to refreshing classrooms. So, for example, this past summer we replaced all of our control processors, our matrix switchers, and our touch panels. It's a little bit tedious. There's lots of kind of problems that kind of come with doing it that way as opposed to wholesale refreshes, and the podiums get a little bit more cluttered, but we're able to leverage our buying power a lot more, right? If I'm buying 150 of a thing, I'm able to get each of them at a much lower price point. So that's nice.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you both so much for joining me today. If people want to connect with you or learn more about you, where can they find you? Troy, we'll start with you.
So yeah, LinkedIn, the HETMA community website, hetma.org. My email, troy.powers@northwestern.edu.
And George, what about you?
Sure. On LinkedIn, George-Chaco-CTS, because there's a lot of George Chacos out there. And you can find me on thenextlvl.org. That's our non-profit organization to youthify and diversify AV.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll